Have you ever had the quiet, unsettling feeling that somewhere along the way, the promise of who you once were slipped through your fingers? Think back. You were the smart kid, the one teachers admired, the one family members bragged about, the one who always had the answer, who seemed destined for something extraordinary. People said you had potential, a bright future, a mind that would take you anywhere you wanted to go. But here you are, years later, and that brilliance feels dimmed. Instead of soaring, you feel stuck. Instead of inspired, you feel uninspired. Instead of ahead, you feel behind. And perhaps the most painful part, you feel disconnected from the version of yourself that everyone once believed in, including you. So what happened? Where did that momentum go? Why does the label that once felt like a crown now feel like a weight around your neck? Here's the truth that no one told you. Being the smart kid doesn't guarantee a fulfilling life. In fact, it often plants the seeds of a very specific kind of existential crisis, one that is invisible to most, but deeply felt by those who live it. The psychologist Carol Dweck, famous for her work on mindset, discovered something crucial. The way children are praised shapes how they grow. If you were praised for your intelligence, for being so smart, you likely developed what she calls a fixed mindset. The belief that intelligence is static, something you either have or don't. That praise, though well-meaning, created fragility. Because the moment you encountered a challenge that didn't come effortlessly, fear set in. If success was proof you were gifted, then failure became proof that you weren't. And so you learned to avoid risks, to play it safe, to stay in spaces where you could keep the illusion alive. Let me ask you directly, how many times have you avoided trying something new? Not because you didn't want it, but because deep down, you were terrified it would reveal that you're not as smart as everyone once believed? This fear of being exposed is not laziness. It's not weakness. It's the natural outcome of a childhood identity built entirely around being the smart one. And now as an adult, you find yourself stuck not because you failed, but because you were conditioned to believe that failure was never an option. And that changes everything. Here's the truth no one explained to you. Being smart was never just about test scores, grades, or IQ points. It was about something much deeper. Your sensitivity, your intensity, your hunger for meaning. That fire inside you wasn't just intelligence, it was awareness. It was curiosity. It was a way of seeing the world that most people never could. But here's where the fracture began. The system rewarded you for being impressive, not authentic. You were praised for results, not for the raw spark that created them. Slowly you learned to perform, to produce, to be remarkable on the outside, even if it meant silencing what was true on the inside. That's why, as an adult, you feel the way you do. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you failed. It's because you're misaligned. You've been living according to someone else's measure of success instead of your own. And here's the hope. Alignment can be restored. The version of you that feels whole, alive, and limitless hasn't disappeared. It's just waiting for you to turn back toward it. So let me ask you a question, and really sit with it. What did you love doing before anyone told you whether it was useful? Before it was graded, measured, or turned into proof? The answer to that question is a doorway back to yourself. Because here's something essential. Your discomfort, your restlessness, your sense of being lost, they are not signs of weakness. They are signals. Signals that you've outgrown the identity built on being the smart kid. The Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski called this process positive disintegration. He believed that gifted, sensitive people often go through deep inner crises, not because they're broken, but because they are transforming. What feels like falling apart is often the beginning of falling into place. The disintegration of the old self is the soil where the authentic self begins to grow. So the unease you feel, the dissatisfaction, the sense that life should mean more than it does, that's not a flaw to fix. That's your invitation. An invitation to stop clinging to the idea that your worth is tied to always being the smart one. Because you don't need to be flawless. You don't need to impress. You are allowed to be imperfect, messy, unfinished, fully human. And in that humanity, you'll find a freedom that was never available in perfection. Intelligence is not a straight line. It's not a ladder you climb or a race you win. It's more like a spiral, circling back to the same questions, the same passions, the same longings, but each time with new depth, new perspective, new wisdom. The goal was never to climb higher than everyone else. The goal was always to return closer to yourself. So how do you begin that return? Not in grand gestures, but in small, deliberate choices. First, your mental diet. For years, your mind has been fed a stream of shallow consumption, quick hits of distraction, endless scrolling, constant noise. It leaves you overstimulated but undernourished. The restoration begins when you choose to replace some of that noise with substance. Read words that stretch your mind. Listen to voices that spark curiosity instead of cynicism. Feed your intellect with what makes you come alive. Second, solitude. Not loneliness, not isolation, solitude. The intentional stillness where you allow yourself to hear the voice beneath the voices. Because for too long, your inner voice has been drowned out by expectations, comparisons, and noise. When you create quiet, even for a few minutes a day, you rediscover the compass you thought you lost. Third, play. Not performance, not achievement, not proving anything. Just play. Creativity without agenda. Curiosity without outcome. Remember what it felt like to explore simply because it was fun? That energy is not childish, it's essential. It's the soil where your originality takes root again. And through all of this, hold on to this truth. Your brilliance never left you. It's still here, waiting to be remembered. But to fully reclaim it, you must look deeper. Beneath the surface, there's an unspoken contract you may have been carrying since childhood. If I succeed, I'm worthy. If I fail, I'm nothing. That belief has kept you trapped, because it makes every risk feel dangerous and every mistake feel fatal. But here's the reality. Your worth was never conditional. Success doesn't prove it, and failure doesn't erase it. And this leads to the hardest but most necessary challenge, realizing that comfort is not fulfillment. Settling is not thriving. You weren't meant to shrink yourself into a version of life that feels safe but empty. You were meant to expand, to experiment, to create, to live in ways that sometimes scare you, because only then will you feel alive again. There comes a moment when you realize the greatest trap wasn't failure, it was approval. For years, you've been hustling for worthiness, polishing your image, performing the role of the smart one so convincingly that you forgot who you were underneath. But as Brené Brown reminds us, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. Authenticity is the first shift. To choose truth over image. To stop chasing the applause and start choosing alignment. Because the more you hide behind the mask of competence, the further you drift from yourself. But authenticity doesn't live in the mind alone. The second shift is embodiment. Because the body keeps score. Every disappointment, every impossible expectation, every unspoken fear, they don't vanish. They embed themselves in your nervous system. That's why you freeze before opportunities. That's why you procrastinate even when you care. That's why you sabotage yourself just when you're getting close. It isn't laziness, it isn't weakness, it's a survival response. Healing begins when you teach your body safety again. Through breath work, through mindful movement, through somatic awareness that says, I am here, I am safe, I can expand. The third shift is action, but not the kind you've been taught. Motivation doesn't come first. Motivation follows movement. Waiting to feel ready will keep you frozen forever. Instead, begin with micro actions. Read the first page, not the whole book. Send the first email, not build the whole plan. Small, consistent steps train your nervous system to equate movement with safety. And soon, momentum carries you further than motivation ever could. And then, connection. Because many who were praised as the smart kid grew into adults who feel quietly alone. Not because they lack people around them, but because they rarely feel truly seen. The cure isn't more contacts or more crowds. It's authentic community. Conversations where your depth isn't too much, but welcomed. Relationships where growth is encouraged, not feared. But here's the warning. The real danger isn't being stuck. The real danger is getting used to it. Making peace with numbness. Adjusting to the prison of good enough. Viktor Frankl, who survived the worst conditions imaginable, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That is where freedom begins, and it leads us to the final, most important question of all, the one that ties everything together. If you were the smart kid, why do you still feel so lost now?" Here's the truth you've been waiting for. You're not lost because you're broken. You're lost because you're multi-potential. Psychologist Renee Myers first named it, and later Emily Wapnick gave it a voice. Multi-potentiality. The reality that some minds are not built for one path, but for many. The smart kids of yesterday often grow into adults who feel paralyzed. Not because they lack talent, but because they have too much of it. Too many directions calling at once. Too many possibilities burning inside. And here lies the conflict. The world was not designed for you. Schools reward the specialists. Jobs reward predictability. Society applauds people who stay in their lane. But your mind was never meant for lanes. It was meant for landscapes, to build bridges between fields, to innovate, to explore. So when you try to squeeze yourself into one narrow identity, your soul resists. That resistance is not weakness. It's guidance. It's your inner compass saying, there's more. The final shift is this. Stop chasing the life you think you're supposed to live. Stop living for the title, the approval, the polished story, and start creating the life your soul has been asking for all along. That life might not look neat from the outside. It might confuse others. It might not impress your old teachers or your LinkedIn connections, but it will feel real. And real is what you've been starving for. To live as a multi-potential, you'll need 3 core skills. Discernment, the ability to separate your true callings from the endless noise. Not every spark deserves a fire. Project-based living. Not every passion has to be a lifelong marriage. Some are meant to be short stories, not novels, and that's okay. Identity flexibility. You are not your degree. You are not your job title. You are not your productivity. You are a living, evolving story in a world that keeps trying to flatten you. And here's the empowering truth. You never stop being the smart kid. You just stop being allowed to live like one. Now you can reclaim it. You can nurture your brilliance without needing to prove it. You can build a life not from performance, but from alignment. So I'll leave you with one question, the one that could change everything. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting to be ready and simply began? The comments are open. Share your thoughts. Tell your story, because someone out there is searching for the words you just found the courage to say. And remember this, you are not lost. You are not broken. You are becoming. Welcome back.